Hey, this is another video about Cables.gl and Chataigne working together. So Cables.gl, as I described in the previous video, is this kind of flow-based programming tool that could be used for creative coding. Would be great for things that are more in the realm of like physical interactivity, physical computing, but it's not able to kind of interact with external hardware like microcontrollers, sensors, actuators, and maybe other kinds of protocols on the network because it's sort of trapped in a browser. That's where Cables.gl lives. So with the help of Chataigne, it can do all of those things because one of the things that Chataigne does is it can take one protocol and translate it to another really easily. You can take a WebSockets message and change it to OSC, or change MIDI to OSC, or change a joystick key press or button press to telling PowerPoint to change slides. It's really pretty cool piece of software. So in this example, we're going to take advantage of kind of going back and forth between WebSockets and OSC. I'll explain what the goal is, and then I'll explain all the parts. So the goal is to, within Cables.gl, have a way of entering a piece of text and then have some sentiment analysis happen on it. And depending on what that analysis results in, I want the visuals inside Cables.gl to change. So that's really the whole goal. I have an OSC server that I wrote called Sentimental that actually does the sentiment analysis. It takes a string as an OSC message and then does the sentiment analysis and then returns some floating point numbers that tell you about the sentiment. So it would be great if we could communicate directly from Cables.gl to Sentimental, but that's not possible because you can't do OSC from the browser. So instead, we'll go through Chataigne. So just to show you kind of like all of the flow here, I'll just kind of underline things as I'm talking. So the first thing that Cables.gl does is it takes that string that I type in, it turns it into a JSON message because Cables.gl likes to send JSON through and receive JSON when it's doing WebSockets. So I've given a key of text and then the value of I love apples in this case. That's just what I typed in. So it comes to Chataigne, which at this point is acting as a WebSockets server. And Chataigne takes that message and translates it into an OSC message, which is slash text with a value that comes from this JSON over here. It is connected to Sentimental, which is at this moment is acting as an OSC server. So it's accepted Chataigne's client connection and it's accepted the text. It does the sentiment analysis, comes up with these numbers, and then sends a message back with 4 floating point numbers. The first number is kind of the average sentiment, and then there's like positive, negative, neutral, and negative. And essentially, like positive numbers are positive sentiment and negative numbers are negative sentiment. So at this point, to send that message, one interesting detail is it feels like trivia at this point, but I'll show another slide where maybe it's useful to know. When you make a WebSockets connection from a WebSockets client to a WebSockets server, once that connection is made, they can talk back and forth to each other through that channel that's been made, that's been established. OSC works differently. So Chataigne in the beginning is acting as a client and Sentimental is the server. And then to send the sentiment message back, they actually kind of reverse roles. So Sentimental is now the OSC client and Chataigne is acting as the OSC server. So the one reason why this is useful to know is because Chataigne is doing 3 things. It's acting as a WebSockets server, it's also acting as a WebSockets client, and it's acting as an OSC client, and it's acting as an OSC server. So there's kind of like 3 jobs it's doing. When it gets that OSC message from its OSC client now, it translates it to JSON and sends it through WebSockets back to Cables.gl. So that's the whole process. I'll refer back to this while I'm going through everything, so you know where we are in the process. But we're going to basically follow the arrows. We're going to make this work, then the second part work, and then the third part work, and then the fourth part work. So this kind of like bit of trivia that I was talking about, the way that OSC works, client and server. One interesting reason to know that is because you could have something set up like this, where there are three different phones, 10 different phones, one phone, whatever. that have some kind of OSC client. Maybe it's some app that you wrote that takes some bit of text from the user and sends it as an OSC client to the Sentimental server. Sentimental does the sentiment analysis and then sends an OSC message to Chataigne with the results. And then Chataigne forwards it to Cables.gl as a WebSockets message with JSON. So this is, essentially, it was very close to what I just showed. But one interesting detail is that each of these could actually be on a different device. So you've got all of the three phones are obviously their own devices, but then Sentimental could be running on one computer, Chataigne could be running on another computer, and Cables.gl could be running on another computer, a third computer. So that's interesting to understand. Maybe not important for this example, but I just wanted to mention it. So here's Sentimental. You can just go to GitHub and download it. If you go to the releases page, it's got all the different releases for whatever operating system you're running. It's a command line program, so you just run it as Sentimental from the terminal with probably like the server address and port. Maybe, some of these you can accept the defaults. And then --verbose is really useful because it shows the messages as they go out and come in, and it also shows the sentiment analysis details. So this is super useful to have that on. And then --all is actually what makes it send 4 floating point numbers instead of just 1. So if you leave --all off, it'll just send the compound or average score. So here's what I got so far in Cables.gl. Basically, I've got like a sidebar here that includes the ability to type some text, and then I've got these 3 sliders. So as you move the sliders, it changes this bar graph on the right. And if it's a positive number, it's fully opaque. If it's a negative number, it turns partially opaque. So that's one little detail there. So I'll just run through this kind of network or program or whatever they call it in Cables.gl. And it's actually pretty simple. It's super cool that just these 5 nodes here allow you to make this sidebar. So that's all that is. Text input doesn't do anything right now, but these other 3, the 3 sliders, take their output, which are floating point numbers, and turn them into an array. So you can see by hovering over the cable here, it's an array that has 3 numbers, 3 items in it. Each of them is one of the numbers from the sliders. Then there's an array iterator numbers. This is kind of how we loop in Cables.gl. So what this is doing is actually everything below this point is happening constantly for each of these 3 numbers. So what is it doing for each of those numbers? It's just drawing a rectangle. You could tell, right? Like this is a rectangle for that one or whatever. I'm not sure, depending on how I hooked up the cables. It's one of these corresponds to one of these sliders. Yeah, I guess it's that one and that one. So that's, yeah, okay. So it's basically just in the whole thing down here is to draw a rectangle. But there are a couple little details. As I said, the color changes depending on which one of these sliders it is. So that's what this section is. It's just changing depending on which item it is, item 0, 1, or 2. It changes the color and applies that to the material that is then applied to the rectangle. Also, depending on which number it is, 0, 1, or 2, it transforms it. Otherwise, they'd just be all drawn on top of each other. So it's got that there. And then the last thing is it looks to see if it's below 0. If the number is less than 0, which is the comparison here, then it will pick between one of these 2 numbers in this switch number node. So 1 is fully opaque, 0.25 is like a quarter of the opacity. So that's that last part. So this is working. The text input isn't working necessarily, but that's the first thing we're going to do. So if you look back at the diagram, basically it's the first thing we want to do is get this text to be sent as a WebSockets message to Chataigne. So let's make that happen. The first thing we need is a WebSockets node. And this is just how we make the connection to the WebSockets server. We also need a WebSocket send. That's how we'll send the message. The third, I'm relying a lot on the colors here. And so anything that's pink is an object. We've got a WebSocket connection object, and that goes to the WebSocket connection object input on WebSocket send. We also need to take the text here, which is the salmon color, take the text that comes out of the text input and feed that to this WebSocket send. That's what we want to send, but there is no salmon input here. There's only an object. So let's see, that object is what's going to get sent. So what we have to do is, an object in this case is JSON. It's going to be a JSON message like it's shown in my diagram. So we need to turn this string, which is just something I type in, into a JSON message that looks like the example I showed, the diagram that I showed. So what I can do is I can do object set string. This creates an object based on a string. So there's my salmon input. We'll take that from the text input node here. And then now I have an object that I can use for WebSocket send. So that does seem like that's all of it. The only detail is that WebSocket send when is it sending? Well, when the trigger gets triggered. And we don't want it to happen like the main loop here is just, you can see these cables are active all the time. Main loop is just constantly going. This is like the run loop for the whole thing. We don't want to just keep sending messages. So we want to send the message probably anytime someone, if there was a submit button here, we'd do that. But if I type something and hit tab, one interesting thing is this text input node has a little focus output. And so every time I click on that tab, you can see it changes on that input. Or if I hit the tab button, it also kind of flickers. So that's useful. Anytime that value changes, it would be useful to have a trigger. So there is actually literally something that is trigger on change number. So that's exactly what we need in this case. We want to say anytime this number changes, create a trigger, and that trigger will be telling it to send that WebSocket message. Okay, I think this is it. If we want to be able to visualize that easier, we can do viz trigger, and we should see every time I click on this, that ball sort of flashes, and it actually counts the triggers, which is not useful in this case, but could be. So, okay, there we go. I think this is it. This qualifies us for that first part of the diagram, except that we need a server listening on the other end. We'll also need the actual server information here, but there is no server yet. So let's get to making a server. So we go into Chataigne and click on the plus in here under modules, and we will choose WebSocket server. I know that the protocol is not going to be lines. I'm not sending lines of text. I'm sending JSON, so I'll change that. I'll also just make sure it's going to log any incoming and outgoing messages. That'll help us to figure out what's going on. The port is 8080. It's not a secure connection, and there are no clients connected right now. But really, all I had to do was change JSON. So let's go over here, since I have a server now. Well, what IP address is the server running on? That's a question. So I can find out my IP address in some way. I don't use Windows a whole lot. I prefer Linux, so I'm not exactly sure how to do it. But I think one easy thing is that I know that the OSC module, which I will need, does show the IP address. So there it is, 192.168.4.124. So let me go back over to Cables.gl and add that information in here. So it's 192.168.4.124 colon 8080 because that's the port that it showed in Chataigne. I do need the protocol, so it's ws://. It would have been WSS if it was a secure connection. So already it says connected true. Let's look over in Chataigne. It says there's one connected client. Perfect. So actually I should be able to just type something. This is my text. And then I hit tab. And there it is. It's showing up. No, not exactly. It's showing down here an empty JSON message was received. So let's see where I broke it. Object set string does need a key, right? So here's the value, but it does need a key. And again, in my original diagram, I showed that it would be called text. So let's see if that helps. This is my text. I just clicked on it, so it actually should have sent the message already. And there it is. Text is the key. This is my text is the message. So that's working. I made a WebSocket server here just by clicking plus. That was it. So now let's move on to the next part, which is, can we get Chataigne to send a message, with some text to the Sentimental OSC server? So over here under OSC, I'm going to, again, choose log incoming and outgoing. And again, I don't have an OSC server yet, so let's set that up. I'll go to the terminal, and I actually did have it running, but let's clear the screen and run it again. So Sentimental dash dash all dash dash verbose, and then I've got the server address here, which is that same IP address we saw, and I'll hit enter. It's running now. It tells me that the port number it's listening on is 8884. So that's important here. The OSC output should be 8884. The output from Chataigne should be the same port that it's listening to over here. I'm going to also, how do I make this sticky? Okay, that's sticky now. So this will stay up while we change things over here. So this is, the output is 8884. And if you look at the sentimental documentation, it's 8885 is the other direction. But it would be useful right now to just be able to send a message just as a test. We've got this command tester. Can I just send an OSC message and see Sentimental receive it? Let's see. So I'll click command here, custom message. It should be text is the actual message. And then I'll add a string, which is I love apples. And then I can hit trigger here and well, it should have sent it here. It doesn't look like, it looks like it was sent in the log here, but it doesn't show it as being received over here, which it should show because it's got dash dash verbose. So I think the trouble is under OSC output, you can see the remote host is grayed out. This is where it's sending OSC to. And even if it wasn't grayed out, it shows 127.0.0.1. So that's because it's checked, local is checked here. So let's get rid of that and let's put in the actual IP address that the server is running on. So it's the same one we've been using, 192.168.4.124. And let's try now. So I'll hit test again or trigger. And there it is. It worked. So it sent a message and then it also received it. There it is. Sentiment is the value that came back from that OSC OSC client, right? Because this OSC module here is both input and output. It is both client and server at the same time. Now, the interesting thing is like it got sentiment back, but it's showing a color here. And that's because it's sentimental is sending back 4 floating point values. And I think over here, it's like, oh, 4 floating point values, that must be a color, RGB and alpha. So it's translated it to a color. It's okay. I don't care. I can see down here that it actually received the right numbers. So that's good enough for me. Let it think that it's a color. I don't really care. Okay. So now, is it possible that in Cables.gl, I could actually send like, this is my favorite fruit. I don't know why I'm typing. I mean, I could type anything at this point. I just want to see when I hit tab, does it send it to sentimental? And it doesn't. So what am I missing? I've got this kind of piece over here that's sentimental. I mean, sorry, Cables.gl sending to Chataigne, and I've got Chataigne able to send to sentimental. What I don't have is the mapping. It's not taking the WebSockets message and mapping it to an OSC message. So that's what I need to do. It is being received here, you can see, as a JSON message. But what I need is the connection between the two. So what I'm going to do is over here under state machine, I'm going to right click and choose add state. Then I'll hit the plus sign and say I want a mapping. So I will actually rename this to WebSockets to OSC. And this is where I tell it that the message that's coming in is coming from the WebSocket server. It's the message called text or the key of text. And then what's the output? The output is, let me hit the plus, going to be OSC, a custom message, which is text is the message. And the argument is, oh, we got a crash over here. This happens every time. It's okay. I'm not worried about it. The message is going to be a string argument, which if I click this little link here, I can say that's coming from the mapping input, which is this thing up here, the WebSocket server. It's going to be its string. So this should work. Let me restart the server here. And let's see if that works. So over in Cables.gl, I will click here. It actually should have worked already, I think. Let's see. Well, let me type in something new. I love grapes. Tab. Okay, it worked. There is something somewhere in here, I think, where if the same message comes across, it won't resend it. So that's why putting in a different message worked. I think that's true. So the whole top half of my diagram is working. WebSockets message was received. It was translated to OSC, sent to sentimental, and actually the beginning of the bottom part, half of the bottom part is working as well because it's getting the OSC message back and it's hitting Chataigne just as we wanted. So there's really only one more piece here, which is to make the connection, the translation from OSC to WebSockets on the way back. So we will create a new mapping, and I'll rename this immediately to OSC to WS. And this should be, the input value should just be from OSC, and there it already shows sentiment. It just knows that a sentiment message came in recently, so that's probably something I'm interested in. And then for outputs, we're going to send it as a WebSocket server message. And you might think just a string is good enough, but that's a problem because if we send it as a string, it's just going to send the four numbers that came over as a string, and that's not going to work for Cables.gl. It wants a JSON message. So let's what we can do is just kind of construct a JSON message by concatenating some strings together. Well, I'll show you what that looks like. So I'll choose send values as string, and I'm just going to down here create the beginning of my JSON message according to the diagram that I showed. So it's called sentiments. It's got a key of sentiments. There's a colon, and then there's quotes. And then at the very end of the message is quotes and closing curly braces. In the middle, inside those quotes with the value, it's got 3 floating point numbers, and they're separated by commas. So that separator looks correct. I think maybe I'll append carriage return. I don't know if that matters. And then the actual values in there that are getting separated by commas should be the messages that came in as floats from the OSC server. So I've got 4 values here. It still thinks this is a color because they're 4 floats. So we know value 1 is the kind of the summary value. So we actually want the other 3. So I'll choose value 2 here. I'll add another one. This will be value 3. I'll add another one, and this will be value 4. Let me go over here and just type I love quinces, hit tab, and I do have a number here. I have, if I'm click on WebSocket, I've got numbers here. Do they match? They don't exactly match. Oh, they do. Okay, 6, 7, 4. I don't know. Let's try a different. Let's see if this is working at all, because I've been doing some experimenting. So let's see. I love projectors. Okay, so nothing's coming over. That's interesting. So this is from my experiments before. So, you know, it's a little finicky to get going because this should be 675 323. Let's try another one. I love tables. So those numbers aren't changing. So one thing that I found is like just turning it off and back on, as absurd as that sounds. I'm turning it off and maybe send something else. I love garages. Let me turn this back on and try again. I love tents. So yeah, I mean, it's not showing those numbers. It's also tricky because a lot of the tests that you would give, like really short tests like that, have the same values, but right now those are not the values that I'm expecting to see. So, or I mean, I guess they could be. Let's try a totally different. Okay, well, it is working. So that's interesting. So it looked like it wasn't working because of the test strings that I was giving it were just too simple. So I did fight with this a little bit, and turning it off and on did seem to matter, but hard to tell now. I think I will show you over here. Let's go over here and just show you. I skipped this part, but we do want a result here, and so taking the result of what comes back from the WebSocket server, like the message that was sent over, I fed this to an object get string because it's a JSON object, but I do want, there's the JSON, but I just want the last 3 numbers, right? Because that's all I'm getting here. Like I want 3 numbers. That's what I want to feed to the array iterator numbers node there. So I do need to give it the sentiments key so that it will pick out those 3 numbers. And now, this 3 numbers, it sort of looks like the same thing that comes out here. So I may be able to just feed this right to this, but you can see this is a salmon output. It's a string. So I do need to translate that string to an array of numbers. So let's see how I do that. I think it's literally just string to array. Let's see if that works. So I will take this, that's 3, there's an array of 3 things. It looks just like the other array. And I'll just leave this connected as well because this still does work. But if I type in some new message here, I really hate some things sometimes, and hit tab, it does seem to be working, right? So I've got 0, there's no positivity in that statement, and then these other 2 numbers for neutral and negative, and that's where those are showing up. So yeah, this seems like it's all working. So let's look back one more time at the diagram, make sure we've got it all. So we enter some text, it goes to Chataigne, Chataigne sends it to Sentimental, Sentimental sends it back as an OSC message, and then it eventually gets back to Cables.gl where it gets that JSON message gets picked apart, and the last 3 values are turned into an array of numbers, and those essentially have the same result as the 3 different sliders here, right? An array of numbers is what we're interested in over there, and the same over here. And I left these 2 connected, but obviously it jumps when I use one or the other. But it is interesting to see that they are essentially the same. So there's a lot there, and it is very tricky, I think, to get all of the parts lined up. But hopefully the diagram helped, and following it through from beginning to end made sense. Okay, take care.